Today's verses for the day come as part of Paul's specific charge to Timothy about how he's to conduct himself as a pastor. And part of what he says in chapter 4 in verses 2 and 3 is proclaim the message, be persistent, whether the time is favorable or unfavorable. Convince, rebuke, and encourage with the utmost patience in teaching. For the time is coming when people will not put up with sound doctrine, but having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own desires. I appreciate these verses from Paul as someone who has spent a good part of my working life trying to preach and teach for 33 years almost now. And Paul is right when he says that times can be favorable or unfavorable. There are some seasons where it may be easier to do the job as a preacher and teacher, and other times when it's more difficult. And I can tell you personally, I think it's much harder to be a pastor. It's harder to preach faithfully now than it was even 10 years ago. It's much more difficult. And he says we need to keep preaching the word and convince. We want to try to be persuasive. Rebuke. One of my tasks as a preacher sometimes is to tell you, hey, you got to get back on God's path because you're not there right now. And encourage, because we all need encouragement. I'm still waiting for the time when I meet someone who says, no, stop, please. I'm getting too much encouragement in my life. Still haven't met that person yet. But that threefold emphasis in preaching and teaching, convince, rebuke, and encourage, that's not easy because people are very receptive to encouragement. They're not quite as receptive to being convinced of something if they don't already believe it. And most people aren't lining up saying, I'm coming to church today and I hope I get a good rebuking. I don't get a whole lot of people coming to church feeling that way. But the observation, which is really true, that the time is coming when people won't put up with sound doctrine, but having itching ears, they'll accumulate teachers to suit their own desires. That's become much, much more easy in the religious business environment, if you will, in the United States, where there's so many different churches that if someone doesn't like what I'm saying from the pulpit, they'll just go find a church where they like what someone says from the pulpit or that it agrees with what they already think. When the church was beginning and there might only be one church in a community, one church in Philippi or Corinth or Ephesus, it was harder to just walk down the street to another church if you didn't like what the preacher or the priest was saying. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, people can just walk from one church into another and find something that suits them. Unfortunately, choosing a church almost like you choose a breakfast cereal. There's a whole lot in the aisle and you just take the one you want. It's not easy being a pastor. Paul says that 2,000 years ago, and it's still true today. But I'm grateful to be the pastor of Brewster Baptist Church and to be serving alongside all of you.